This first Kamitian text study will allow us to give tribute to Nusire Kalala Omotunde, which was a professor from Guadeloupe, who introduced many of us to classical African humanities. I haven't found an English translation to the book, so I'll do my best to summarize it because I believe a lot of commissioned French-speaking writers have so much content that would benefit English speakers to know.
Kamitian Cosmo-Genesis, Tome 1, by Kalala Omotunde. Preface. Science recently demonstrated that Black Africa is the cradle of the modern human being who appeared more than 200,000 years ago in the African Great Lakes region. The African modern human is therefore the elder, since he witnessed the birth of every other human variety, Europeans, Asians, Semitic, etc. That's the reason why we can't really talk about racism in reality, because they are our descendants. Indeed, they are direct descendants of groups of men and women who in the old days left Black Africa to go and populate the planet in diverse places. The King Narmer founded the enormous scientific, technical, and philosophical spiritual discoveries executed by the Kemet civilization, today known as Ancient Egypt, from which the historical foundations are unquestionably Sudanese, from the King Narmer, who was a genius civilizing Anu around 3200 of the ancient African era. The Anu people are Egyptian ancestors who founded the first state of the universal history known as Kemet. They were hunter-picker people originating from the south of Sudan who mastered, amongst other things, navigation, writing, architecture, arts and crafts, astronomy, the calendar, mathematics, etc. The Anu people invented writing and are the editors of the first sacred texts, professing the existence of a unique God in human history, dating from the end of the 4th millennium of the ancient African era. This monotheistic notion was taken back in Judaism with the notion of Yahweh around 459 of the ancient African era, then by Christianism with God in the 1st century of the Occidental era, and then Allah around 800 of the Occidental era. The Medu Necher, God's words or holy scriptures, are contained in our famous Midjat Necher, that is our sacred book. Occidental Egyptology calls this ancestral sacred book the ancient Egyptian Book of the Dead, but the real title is Ra'u Nu Geret Em Eru, that is the sacred formulas allowing the righteous deceased soul to exit in the light of day. In fact, the soul judgment and the belief in the resurrection and life in the afterlife is proven in the Commission Sacred Texts, which composes the liturgical final corpus of our Book of Resurrection, composed of the following texts: the sacred text of the pyramids, which are ritual texts that accompanied the deceased king soul in the afterlife; the sacred text of the sarcophagi, which resumed in majority the sacred text of the pyramids; the of laws, which biblical editors widely drawn from to write the daily and spiritual life acts attributed to Moses; the Book of the Two Paths, or the Book of the Duat, that contained a map of the 12 regions of the afterlife that the soul needed to cross after death to resurrect. It was composed of prayers that the virtuous soul of the deceased had to pronounce while following the divine light, bringing him to the fields of Yalu, known as the Kingdom of Heaven in Christianity, where only the Mag-Eru are admitted, the righteous, the holy, who made Ma'at live in their heart. Thus, our ancestors used to say, "Happy are those who come to the abode of the righteous. No one succeeds except the one whose heart is exact in practicing equity. There, no distinction between the rich and the poor. Only enters the righteous by the scale and the weight of the feather of truth in front of the Lord of eternity." Because the scriptures show that we used to weight the heart against the feather of the Mahat, which is the truth, the justice. The text, the litanies of Re, revealing 75 aspects by which the Creator manifests himself in his creation. And finally, the writings of the wise commissions, which mission was to reveal to the people the divine principles and precepts guaranteeing the resurrection of their soul. We can cite one of them, the lessons of Tao Te. All those texts that I cited compose the corpus of our sacred texts, of which our ancestral Book of Resurrection is the first one to attest that, and I quote, "The origin of all things is the creator of all things, which is the unique Ta." End of quote. Ta proceed from the verb ta, which means create. For our Anu ancestors, it is from a unique creator that all the elements of the universe and life came out of. The paradox of slavery and colonial history is that if Napoleon Bonaparte brought back the notion that Africans should be considered as personal property for the European financial profits, it is his military scientific expedition in Egypt around 1798 to 1801 that allowed the removal of the Occidental history falsification of the Black world and crushed the very foundation of Judeo-Christianity, of which the roots are since undeniably Africans. In 1783, the Count of Volney, after his trip to study in Egypt, states this in his will, and I quote, "This black race, today our slave and the object of our contempt, is the very one to whom we owe our arts, our sciences, and even the use of speech." Finally, to imagine that it is in the midst of peoples who call themselves the most friends of freedom and humanity that we have sanctioned the most barbaric of slavery and questioned whether black men have an intelligence of species of white men. Most of the pharaoh's statues have the nose broken to prevent people from distinguishing their negroid characters, and the French artist and painter Dominique Denon, who accompanied the expedition in Egypt, says that texts concerning the Sphinx of Giza. The expression of the head is soft, graceful, and quiet. The character is African. It has been proven that the African sacred texts were copied. This is why we can find in the Bible, for example, when the God of the Bible, Yahweh, is praised Moses when he said, 1,000 years in your sight are like a day that has just gone by. We can read in 2 Egyptians hymn to Amun-Ra, Jet, or the eternity in your sight are like a day that has just gone by. Was verse Surah 2, verse 163 that they say summarizes all the writings of the Quran that says, your God is the unique God. There is none other than him, the all-merciful. But it is in reality a copy of the very famous hymn to Aton, written by the pharaoh Akhenaton, who said, O unique God, who has no other above him, of which the biblical Psalm 104 also echoes. The sacred initiatory texts of the Imperial Africa are invaluable sources, testifying to an immense ancestral knowledge which modern science does not seem to have exceeded. It is therefore the cosmotheological science of our initiating ancestors that Kalala Omotunde invites us to discover in his work, so that we can all become aware of the immense value of our African historical, cultural, scientific, and theological heritage. Heritage returned to us by the illustrious Sheikh Anta Diop, who paved for us the way to our classical African humanities, and to whom we give a vibrant, eternal tribute for his invaluable heritage.